Good evening, everyone, and welcome. May I have a motion, please, that the agenda of March 19th, 2013 be approved as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Approval of the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, that the board approve the following consent agenda? Approval of minutes of March 5th, 2013 as submitted, acceptance of recommendations from the Committee on Special Education, acceptance of recommendations from the Committee on Preschool Special Education, acceptance of recommendations from the Superintendent for Personnel Changes, RFP for the alternative student transportation services for the contract period March 19th, 2013 to June 20th, 2013, which includes 2 school year term renewal options. Also, the SEI Design Group Connor Security Consulting as the recommended bidder per the RFP for the district-wide vulnerability assessment dated March 19th, 2013. May I have a motion, please, that all of these items be approved?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. We have a special report. Good evening to Cobbles Elementary School representatives.
I'm Mrs. Mairani. I'm the librarian at Cobbles. And this past July, I spent 4 weeks in Japan on a Fulbright program for teachers. And I visited landmarks and schools and temples and shrines and participated in a homestay with a Japanese family. While I was there, I focused on taking pictures of a typical student's life in Japan to share with our 3rd grade students.
Hi, I'm Ms. Vatican. I'm the art teacher at Cobbles. So Beth and I created an interdisciplinary lesson for the 3rd graders, and it involved the students using the photos that Mrs. Mairani had took in Japan, and then they created a digital storyboard comparing their lives in the United States to the students' lives in Japan.
Okay, so if you want to come up. So Garrett, you and Cameron are first.
We chose the topic for our story: food, schoolwork, recess, clothing, free time, or special subjects in school. We worked in groups of 4 or 5 students.
Using a storyboard, we developed our story. In the art room, we planned which pictures we would take.
We took photos of ourselves in the U.S., different areas of our school, inside and outside.
Miss Mairani had folders on the computer with pictures of children in Japan for our topics. We picked a few of those photos to illustrate our digital story.
Then we typed our story and narrated it on the computer.
Here is our digital story on recess.
In USA, we play football. We slide down slides. They also slide down slides. In Japan, they play kickball. In USA, we jump off playgrounds like crazy people. In USA, we play on slides. In Japan, they have unicycles. They climb trees, and that's how Japan and USA are the same and different in recess. If I lived in Japan, my favorite thing would be climbing trees at recess. Living in the United States and Japan can sometimes be the same and can also be very different. It is fun learning about different cultures.
Unlike Japanese schools, we eat in our cafeteria. These are pancakes at a Japanese restaurant in Japan. This is a lunch lady at Cobbles. In Japan, they also have lunch ladies. These are some of the students from Cobbles. They are enjoying their lunch.
This is sushi in Japan. We also have sushi here. This is fish from Japan. We also sell fish here in the USA. This is the lunch line in the cafeteria. Brian is getting his lunch.
This is Gary eating his peanut butter sandwich.
This is different food in Japan. We don't have this food here. This is dessert in Japan. It would be cool to see someone make this kind of dessert in the USA. If I lived in Japan, my favorite thing would be the really nice desserts and the teriyaki chicken with Japanese chocolate sauce. Living in the United States and Japan can sometimes be the same, and it can also be very different. It is fun learning about different cultures.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Can we have your students stand up and introduce themselves for us, please?
I'm Garrett Webster. Hi. I'm Cameron Barnsdale. I'm Eva Elliott. I'm Zoe Sagan.
I'm Michael Marquez. I'm Thomas DeFranco.
I'm Manju Coley.
I'm Garrett Webster.
I'm Cameron Barnsdale.
I'm Eva Elliott. I'm Zoe Sagan. I'm Neil Burke.
I'm Christian Grafowski.
I'm Michael Marquez. I'm Thomas DeFranco.
I'm Manju Coley.
Well, first, I want to compliment them. They did such a great job with the microphone. As you can see, they do not give the board members a microphone. They put them on the table because we don't know what to do with them. So you guys were awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Board members, do you have any questions? Barb?
Were you, when you went with or learned the things from Mrs. Mairani, what was the one thing, whoever wants to answer this, what was the one thing that really stuck out that was, you saw that was the same?
Mostly, there's many different things, but they always have something in common because they have recess and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Did anyone want to say anything that you noticed that was really different? Something that just seems so unusual and surprising to you? Can you think of something, Zoe?
They get to ride unicycles at recess.
Can I just, so does this mean you're going to request, the gym teachers are going to ask for unicycle money, or?
It could be dangerous.
Yeah.
What, you know, at recess in Japan, they don't have any monitors that go out with them or teachers, and our kids were surprised by that. And you saw them climbing trees. They must not have people that, I'm thinking here, are worried about the children's safety. It's different there. So the unicycles, it's surprising.
Did you learn how to ride one while you were there?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Next week's demonstration.
Board members, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. We really want to thank you for being here. We hear all about the awesome trips that you take all the time, and it is just so great for you to come here, present to us, especially at this time of the year where all we're seeing are spreadsheets and numbers. And this is really what it's all about, our students. So thank you so much for this wonderful reminder and the terrific work you are doing with them.
And thank you for having us. It was really a big deal for us. We invited the 9 children, and every one of them made it with special arrangements about their personal schedule. So thank you to the parents, too.
Well, before you leave, I would like to give each one of your students one of the pins that we give to the students who are very, very special in Penfield. So if, how are we going to do this? There's so many of them, but I'll just come there.
Oh.
Okay, I think that's it for the presentation. Again, thank you for coming, and you're welcome to stay for the whole board meeting. Yeah, unless there's homework to do, right? All right, board members, this brings us to our visitor speaking time. There's time provided on the agenda for any visitor who would like to come and address the board. And we have an indication here that Mr. Thomas Kinsman, 34 Random Knolls, wishes to address the board. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm a little nervous. I always get nervous when I'm on camera. It's the kind of nervousness that makes science teachers say salt is made out of potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride, and then Ms. Rattan has to fix it. But many things worth doing are difficult. I'm Thomas Kinsman, 34 Random Knolls Drive. I study vision cognition, which means thinking and understanding, and imaging science as a PhD student at one of our local institutes. I have a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon University, one of the top research institutes in the United States. I regularly attended conferences on education at RIT, and I recently asked by the director of the Center of Imaging Science at RIT to attend a conference on STEM education next month at Nazareth. I'm the only resident of Penfield I know who has attended all of the board meetings and all of the board budget workshops this year, with the exception of one conversation on education that I intentionally stayed out of to leave room for others. I've reported much of this back to the fellow members of the Penfield Parents Advocating Challenge in Education group, Penfield PACE, so that they can provide you with educated feedback about the current budget plan. You may hear from them separately or individually through other means. I know about the 2% tax cap that Governor Cuomo signed into law. The law was designed to sound good to voters, but does not mean that the tax increase is capped at 2% in any way. That law was designed to help Governor Cuomo's popularity and to prevent tax hikes for landlords in New York City, not to help the residents of Penfield or the Penfield School District. I understand that the prior school administration has been using up reserves for the past several years in order to avoid difficult budget increases and to make it easier to pass a budget. The purpose of the reserves is to help ride out short-term ups and downs, yet Penfield has been using up reserves for what seems to be 5 to 7 years straight. This is not what those spending reserves are for. I'm painfully familiar with the unfunded mandates that get passed down to Penfield from the state and federal levels. I know the impact of the annual professional performance review will have on our staff, and I feel that the Common Core standards are a minimum standard for Penfield. I know the numbers of teachers that have been laid off in the past 3 years and can detail that impact on my children. I'm shocked at how many math professors have been eliminated. In our world, a person's ability to do science, engineering, optics, metrology, meteorology, graphic arts, run a small business, or run a school board is ultimately limited by their ability to do mathematical reasoning. Mathematics limits success in many, many fields. Because of my interest in cognition and how people think, I'm very familiar with the linkage between music and art, and with the ability of a student to learn mathematics and science. They both use the same parts of the brain. When we teach our grade school children art, we're teaching them how to use their visual spatial skills to understand 3D functions in space, shape, and form. I understand that music is a spatial relationship. The notes go up and down, different parts of the orchestra go on and off, and the students learn multidimensional spatial reasoning skills. Music is a dance in the mind. This explains why our music students are some of our smartest students. You will remember that Leonardo da Vinci started as an artist. I know that there is no single intelligence quotient number that explains a child's mind. Furthermore, IQ is not fixed. You can grow your IQ, just as the students in music grow their ability to do music better. There are 27 different dimensions of intelligence, and at Penfield, we have the full spectrum of intellectual talent. That full spectrum must be nurtured with the correct cognitive level for the students to learn. If it's too slow or too fast, they won't engage. It doesn't matter if the student is in special education, enrichment, or both. The purpose of these programs is to nurture the full spectrum of our children at the correct level so that they can reach their full potential. It takes properly trained staff to meet the needs of these children and to help them grow their IQs. It's not tolerable to keep cutting teachers and burning up our reserves at the rate we have been. It looks to me as if at the present rate, Penfield School District will be out of business in about 5 years. Fairport has cut 57 teachers in the last 3 years. I reviewed the state comprehensive information reports just today. When I compare the most recent Regents test scores between Fairport and Penfield, in terms of the fraction of the students doing better than 85% on the Regents exams, with one understandable exception, Penfield did better than Fairport on all science and math Regents exams. That exception was caused by accelerating the class of 2015 and was predicted beforehand. This past weekend, I happened to watch Penfield school students nail the Science Olympiad at the regional competition. 2 Bay Trail students used a mouse spring-powered car to hit a target exactly. These Penfield School District's students could not have done any better. And by the way, the students didn't rub it in. They didn't jump up and down. They just quietly and nonchalantly won. I don't care about our football scores and lacrosse scores and baseball scores. I care about the fraction of our students that are doing better than 85% on the Regents exams. I want our students to have the opportunity to get into the best schools of their choice, to get decent jobs, and to contribute to our economy and my social security. If we haven't learned anything else about the Kodak debacle, we should learn that no amount of cutting is going to make you great. You can't cut your way to greatness. That strategy did not work for Kodak, and it's not working for Fairport. Again, it looks to me that the present rate of expenditure of the Penfield School District will be out of business in a few years. Using the principle of the time value of money, we should head off that disaster as much as possible now. I would sooner see a 5% tax rate hike this year than a phenomenal tax rate and dysfunctional school system in 5 years. I'm not asking you to raise $45 million to build a fast ferry to get to Toronto in the same time it takes to drive there. I'm asking you to support the students, teachers, and staff in Penfield in a way that avoids financial bankruptcy in a few years. I want Penfield to stay great. We are ranked 4th in the Rochester area. We're ranked 12th in Western New York. It may not be easy, but many things worth doing are difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kinsman. We appreciate your remarks and your attendance at our board meetings also. Board members, at this time I would like to acknowledge the number of emails that we received this afternoon from the public. This is the time where I can do this, and I realize that you probably have not seen them. Many, I want to say many of them were sent to my personal address, unfortunately. So if people could remember either to use our district address, or when you send them to our district clerk, she makes sure that the whole board, gets them that way. As per practice, we're going to find an easy way to compile all of them and share them with the whole board. So thank you for all the people who, sent correspondence in regards to the budget. We will take them into consideration when, looking at our numbers and developing our budget this year. And now we move on to our student representative. Hello, Gwen.
Hi. I think that the third graders from Cobbles provided a great segue into what I was going to talk about. Recently, this is the second year, Penfield has attended a global citizenship conference, which was actually started by, when she was a senior in high school, a Pittsford Model UN member, who is Muslim, created this global citizenship conference in an effort to unite people of all different religions and faiths and cultural backgrounds to better understand each other and to discuss religion and faith and culture in the world in a way to combat extremism and hatred and ignorance in schools and in the world in general. And so it's a student-led conference, and it's done at Nazareth, and they have professors and speakers from all over Rochester and outside of Rochester who give you go into sessions, and they give information. You can pick your session, and it's really interesting because you're there with local high school students. There were even people from Albany and Syracuse who were there. And it's growing to be a bigger thing. I think each year it's getting a little bit better. And it's just important for high school students to be exposed to other cultures and religions. Kind of goes along with the whole anti-bullying and understanding and things that we've kind of been focusing on as an entire society. So that was really good. About 12 people from Penfield went. We had a really good time. It was very interesting. A lot of Model UN members, but I know that we're trying to get a more diverse group to go. So I just wanted to point that out. Kind of ties with learning about new cultures and understanding. The musical, I believe, is this weekend. Hello, Dolly. I think you can buy tickets ahead of time. Sometimes they get sold out, so I would do that. I think they're $10. Spring sports started. And basically, this is the long haul to APs. Everyone's studying and working hard. And things kind of pick up more in April and May for this Diversity Week, Dignity for All Students Act. There's a book drive that's going to happen. And Model UN is doing water for Sudan, which is actually a fundraiser or an organization that started in Rochester. So that will be happening.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Gwen?
What is Model UN?
Model UN is a club. Basically, they compete in competitions that model the United Nations. So different schools will get different countries. And I believe Penfield, because it's a rather big club, gets multiple countries, like 2 countries. Mm-hmm. And you have delegates that go into different committees, like Security Council, and I don't know, there's some other examples. And you get issues, and you have to make proposals that sort out the issue. Okay. And so you work with the other countries, and you do debates. So I believe last conference, which was St. John Fisher, Penfield did really well. About half the delegates got medals. So we're finally competing against Brighton. Brighton is they hold all the power in Model UN. So, yeah.
Yeah, Penfield does have a great history with Model UN. I remember one very well-known representative, Tyler Ford, sat as a board representative for us. He was an outstanding delegate, and I believe Steve's daughter also used to be involved in Model UN. So, we have really an outstanding group, and they've had a new advisor for the past couple of years, and she's just done great with the kids. So, Miss Crystal, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much for your report. And we move on to superintendent's reports. Dr. Grimm.
Thank you very much. Tonight's superintendent's report involves student staff honors. We're going to have Dr. Mark Sansucci cover the BOCES budget portion of our total budget, and then we're going to have a school calendar update to get some of those important dates out to the community. Our student honors robotics awards. Our Penfield High School student Santa Robertson was named a Dean's List Award finalist at the Regional First Robotics Competition Team leader Larry Lewis from Harris Corporation also won the Woody Flowers Award, which recognizes first mentors who lead, inspire, and empower using excellent communication skills. I saw that firsthand at the RIT field house, and it was amazing to see the number of kids there. Penfield was well represented. Just amazing group of people, children, and the adults that are working with them. So congratulations to her. Science Congress, PHS students participated in the 36th Annual Science Congress. Lillian Kakavale and Michael Matkowski earned awards for their projects. Also participating were Sarah Timmerman, Sheila Ahmed, and Emily Van Bortel. And we have the Odyssey of the Mind. 4 Bay Trail Middle School teams participated in the Regional Odyssey of the Mind competition on March 9th. The teams finished 2nd, 5th, and 10th in their respective divisions. The Problem 2 team will be advancing to the New York State level competition on March 23rd in Binghamton. And the team members include Sydney Carlo, Andrew Bruno, Alexander Bruno, Aaron Zbick, Colin Casey, Alex Joya, and Christrell Wilder. They're all coached by Jason Zbick. And we had a history award. A Bay Trail 8th grader, Carly Respante, received 2nd place in the Junior Individual Documentary category of the Genesee Valley Regional History Day competition. And the Patriot Pen Awards, 3 Bay Trail students have been named winners in the VFW Post 820s Patriot Pen Contest. Megan Sullivan 1st place, Jessica Avasado 2nd place, and Sam Nitch 3rd place. More student honors. Physics competition. Penfield High School freshman Alan Liu has qualified as a semifinalist in the 2013 U.S. Physics Olympics team competition. The semifinalists will take a second exam to determine the final 20 students who will make the team. Physics Olympics team for the United States. Amazing. The music program recognition, this is another amazing thing. A multiple-year award-winning Penfield Central School District has been named again to the list of best communities for music education by the NAM Foundation. Penfield is one of 307 school districts across the country to earn this designation. And what a great cross-section of student and staff honors. And we also know that behind all of these students, all of these awards are dedicated teachers and staff that help create these opportunities for them, and the families also as well that support those students in doing that. Ultimately, it really does make our school district look great, but it's really because of the collective efforts of all those folks. And now we're on to our budget presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Mark Sansucci.
Good evening. I'm going to be covering 3 separate items as part of this budget presentation, so I'll talk a little bit about the BOCES component of the budget, which is tonight's scheduled segment. We'll talk about where we're at in the process in terms of our race to a total budget and where and the next steps towards finalizing that. And I'll finish up with a little bit about capital projects, some of which we began conversation around in the last board meeting, and one piece of which, the project for gymnasium renovation and roof replacement at Cobbles and Bay Trail, is part of tonight's agenda, later in the agenda. So with that, I'd remind the public, and I know the board knows, that we begin each of these presentations with just a reminder of our goals, that our goals are in 3 parts around academic excellence, partnerships with the community, and high expectations for students and for honoring the financial values of the community. So with that, the budget process is a long one, and it's a process, it's not an event. So we began even earlier than January, but January 8th was the first formal presentation of a portion of the budget. Tonight, we're discussing what is in total 9% of the budget. 9% of the budget's represented by BOCES programs. As we wind this up, I'll be resplitting this out to show you I think how that plays across all the components of the budget. But for tonight, we look at it added in isolation, just what are services that we purchase from BOCES represent. Again, in graphic form, that piece of our pie is in the sort of purple color. And for tonight, it's up 5%. It's about $8,400, about a $404,000 increase. We buy a variety of services from BOCES, and this slide is just, the board has in front of them a more detailed analysis of all the different COSERs, which are the contractual arrangements that we interact with BOCES through. But this is a sampling of some of the items that we purchase through BOCES. So it's regular instruction, it's instructional items, but it's also management support. So for example, I think the piece that people are most in tune to or most aware of in terms of BOCES is special education services. And we do buy special education services through BOCES. We send students to BOCES programs. It's considered a public placement, just like a placement in one of our schools, but they're able to offer programs for students with specialized needs. So the idea behind that, as behind all the BOCES services, is that by pooling our resources, we can operate more efficiently and be able to offer services as a consortium, as a group, as a BOCES that we couldn't offer individually. So, a great example of that's clearly special education, where we might just have one or two students with a particular disability. Other school districts with similar students can share at BOCES and provide a service for 12 kids in a classroom that we just wouldn't be able to do individually. The rest of the services are in like kind. So career and technical education, again, through BOCES, we operate a cooperative summer school. Our driver education is provided through BOCES. The cost of that fully supported by the parents after some changes a number of years ago. They also provide computer services, so our internet filtering, student and financial software is purchased and supported through BOCES. And all of these items, all of the things that you see on this list, again, just a sampling of the more significant items, are supported either by BOCES aid, so the state's interested in our participating in BOCES and will give us aid for services that we purchase through BOCES, or aid for students with disabilities is provided through the handicapped aids. So all of the items that you see in BOCES are supported. This is a slide that in much more detail shows those various components and how they're split out. I think it looks certainly much more dramatic graphically. So here you see that BOCES budget, that $8 million split by area, and what you can see is that the most significant areas in the budget by far are the programs for students with disability. That overshadows just about everything else. From left to right, the other areas that you see across where it's a little more than just a bump on the bottom, finance, that's all of the support services for computing and so on goes through that COSER. Administrative charges, because we participate in BOCES, we're obligated to a share of their administration. That's split up by all of the component districts of the BOCES by the number of students. We pay our share of that. You see regular education, occupational education, again, through BOCES, and specialized transportation. We purchase specialized transportation through BOCES. The significant increase in this year's budget and driving the increase in BOCES is in the area of special education. We have the numbers of students from year to year are stable. At least in terms of the BOCES program, but what has significantly increased are their needs, and we're also purchasing services through BOCES for several students in district that require very specialized teaching or support services primarily in our elementary schools. So those services additionally are also driving that budget. So there's a modest cost increase built into the BOCES budget for similar services. So if you look through your your line items, you'll see that the cost per pupil, for example, goes up a bit, but really it's related services. The cost of those services are going up. The other thing that significantly changes in this year's budget is BOCES is continuing to rationalize its process, and they've changed the way that they bill for speech services. It's fairly complicated, but the cost of speech services to parentally placed non-public schools, we're obligated to provide that service. It's going up as well, driving a portion of that budget. But on the flip side of that, we'll be able to bill that out to those to the districts of residence of those kids. So that washes. The real cost to Penfield, again, is for our kids in our programs. Also, if you notice, just to go back, if I could go back, some of the more dramatic percentage increases, Board of Education, that is about an $8,000 increase. That is a single line item, and that's us purchasing the required audit or actuarial services for GASB compliance. Everybody's going to know about that. Everybody has, certainly we've had lots of conversation about it, but we're purchasing that through BOCES because it'll generate the state aid, and we're cooperating as a county to purchase those actuarial services. So that's not a lot of money, but it is a big, but it is a big percentage change. And then I already touched on shifts in and between the special education programs, so that's related to student needs and to the students placed in those programs. Before I go on, in terms of budget progress, were there specific questions that I could answer with regard to the BOCES budget?
Thank you, Mark. Board members, do you have any questions? Camille?
I have a question. I'm just wondering, there's such a large spectrum of services that BOCES provides, but there are probably some that we don't take advantage, we don't purchase.
Yes, there are quite a few.
Are there some big ones that you look at each year and think, well, maybe that's, I know that we felt we really had to move, I don't know what you call it, but technology in-house because we needed them so much here all the time that we couldn't really share them. So,
right.
But is there anything else we're looking at maybe that we could move into sharing?
And BOCES has also changed their model for how that sharing would work, which was part of the reason we had to pull those, or felt that we had to pull those people back. Certainly we do look, there is a service guide, I gave you the link to that, and BOCES does provide a wide variety of services, and I think it's going to continue to expand, particularly in the area of management services. So as we look at ways to be more efficient, it's that idea of sharing and how it can make sense, I think is going to be a growth area. It's not quite there yet, to be honest with you, but I think it will be a growth area. There's lots of instructional programs, and many of which we don't participate in. And besides our BOCES, there's BOCES 2 across the river that also provides a wide variety of instructional programs. The ones that we participate in are ones that fit with our program, that we feel that we have a need and that make sense to integrate. So we're constantly looking at that, but at this point, there's not, if the question is there something that we really desperately wished we were doing at BOCES, we would have brought it to you and had that conversation, so no.
Okay, and this is a silly question, but the same rate that we're reimbursed by the state for BOCES 1, BOCES 2, it's the same?
It's all the same.
Or Erie 1, whichever BOCES in New York State we can purchase from.
That's
okay.
correct, because we own that ratio, not, it's not BOCES dependent.
Thank you.
Steve?
So following up on that, the reimbursement we get, the state aid we get, we only get for services we purchase from BOCES.
Correct.
We can't go out on the open market and get competitive rates for these items, is that correct?
Well, theoretically, the cost should be cheaper at BOCES if we're cooperating, right? But you're right. If we share with, say, we decided to share outside of BOCES with Gates Chili, that we come to some cooperative arrangement with them. It's cooperative, it might save money, but it's not eligible for BOCES aid. It's not organized through that.
The only field I have any real expertise in is in the computing field, and frequently I've seen that there are cheaper alternatives to what BOCES offers us, but When you factor in the state aid, then no, it ends up being cheaper to go through BOCES. But what concerns me about it is it's still, in the big picture, money out of the taxpayer's pocket. You know, some of it's coming out of their Penfield pocket, others coming out of the state pocket.
Right, and because of that, I think, because there are certain coordination costs, I mean, it's not, BOCES can be cumbersome. I mean, it can be. And so as a result of that, through different administrations, I think BOCES has come into and out of favor. You know, it was for years, I came to you during budget conversations and talked about how BOCES was on the table to be cut and it was going to be eliminated and so on. That tide seems to have turned, and now rather BOCES seems to be much more favored. And as I hear conversations at the state level, the interest is in a more robust role for BOCES. So, I think the tide turned on that. There's a question of efficiency unanswered in that, but that seems to be the way the wind is blowing.
Right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to keep in mind our goals. So we have a few board meetings left and one very important board workshop and some other very significant events before we finalize a budget. But this is where we're at with regard to our progress. So at the next budget, we'll be presenting the final component of the budget, and at that time, we'll begin to look in some depth at our revenues. That'll continue at the following meeting as well. But right now, you can see we've worked our way through the majority of the budget, with the last big piece left to go being the area of benefits, health insurance, Social Security, retirement, and so on. And as you know, I don't need to tell the board again, but certainly I think it bears repeating for the public that, you know, the driver in all school district budgets for this year, and ours is no exception, are going to be retirement system costs. They're up dramatically. I don't think that's a secret. As we've put this budget together and already included in those components that you see, or that you will see, are some changes where we plan on using as a revenue source stimulus money that the districts received, ERRP, it's early retirement reinsurance program money. We've moved the buses completely for next year to the reserve funding, so we'll be purchasing those without any general fund money whatsoever for next year. We're working on reductions. We'd agreed as a board and as a administration to target $500,000 worth of reductions, and we included $300,000 more from the debt service reserve. Again, those items are done. Debt service funds now represent $400,000. That's the increase of $3 from $100,000 where we started. At that point, we're still on track. This is slightly changed, but about 2.1 million, 2.2 million, or 2.6% reduction. That 2.6% increase, again, primarily driven by those retirement system costs. There's still work to be done. We're not done with this budget by a long shot yet, but right now, all the remaining items in the budget, once we've moved out the cost of buses, once we've moved out the debt service, 0.1% is the increase, $540,000 for all the remaining items. It's, once you net out, $1.6 million in retirement system costs. Those changes would leave us at 2.6%, a state aid reduction of 6% from year to year. With that, this is without any additional changes, with a levy right at about the cap at 5.4%, and which would return an estimated tax rate increase at 5%. We're working on additional changes. So in play right now are 5 FTE in terms of replacement, and 5 FTE, which is up 1 and still in process from one. I have presented previously 4. We're working on 5 right now in terms of reductions, and an adopted state budget. This is going to be very important for us, both in terms of how the funding flows to us and what we decide to do with it. So we're on the brink of it right now. I understand from the media that there is a tentative deal. They don't call it that at this point. It's a conceptual agreement. I think it's called conceptual because it allows both parties to back away from it if it turns out not to be a deal after all. It was just in concept. But once there was meetings today, there were meetings today of leadership. Once they come to an agreement, bills will be printed, and the goal, I know, for the legislature is to be out. I think the real deadline is to be out in time for Passover, to be out for the holiday, and that's coming up shortly. They're scheduled to be out of town in advance of that, I think, on Friday, so we'll see. The problem that they're wrestling with, and that this New York State's wrestled with for the past several years, is that their structural deficit. They have choices about how they handle their deficit, including passing some of their problem on to us. But this is the way it shapes up as the governor began his presentation. So facing a $1.3 billion deficit, $1.4 billion deficit for next year, that rolls into the next 4 years for a total of about 16.3. His budget eliminates that gap, the budget he proposed, and significantly reduces the 14.50 in the next year's deficit. There's a little bit of financial trickery in that, but it's important, I think, and it's consequential trickery. So a number of years ago, the state, this was during the Pataki administration, the state adopted a foundation aid formula. The idea was that aid to schools that there was some foundational level that schools should receive. This was in part in response to the lawsuit about adequate funding of education in New York City. It was intended to be an overall response to the level of funding of schools. So it was a promise made. It was a multi-year implementation of that foundation aid. It almost immediately from the moment it was adopted, it was frozen. It's been frozen since. It's not worked. They simply haven't been able to fund it. But the governor's deficit projections, those projections that you see up above, include that going forward. The projections include that foundation aid formula, as it is in law. The governor's budget eliminates that promise, and so it's in on one side in the deficit calculation, but then with the withdrawal of the promise, it also reduces that future liability and the deficit comes down. So that's part of that reduction, a significant part of the reduction. But also real part of the reduction is just much more limited state aid to schools. So the computerized aids, which are really the aids that we talk about. There are a number of grant programs and other programs that are included in general support for public schools. So general support for public schools, including the grants and his competitive grant programs and so on, is up 4.4%, but the computerized aid's only up 3.8%. So when you hear the conversation right now, this is what they're fighting about, is how much does, if it's 4.4, how does it get distributed, and could be more of it be distributed as part of computerized aid? So that's going on right now. Know that even with that general support for public school increase at 4.4%, the larger number of those, that state aid still trails where it was 4 years ago. So you see this is general support from New York State to public schools decreasing from 4 years ago. It's creeping back up, but it still hasn't achieved the level that it was in 9-10. And if I graph Penfield's history in terms of state aid, it's the same bar chart. So in 9-10, we reached our peak. We've got a bump in this year because of the one-time aid. We're falling back down, and we're still about $3 to $4 million less than we were in 9-10. So, that's been part of our challenge as we've built budgets, is we've absorbed those reductions. We've absorbed those reductions while over the course of the last 5 years keeping the levy increases at a very modest level. So, ranging from 0 to 2.9%, but a 5-year average of 1.16%. And the levy, which is not the rate, the levy is the amount of money that the school district collects. The rate, or the amount that any individual taxpayer would pay, was less in each of those years. And I think this bears that out. Tax rate on true is for Penfield and for all school districts, is the levy divided by the full value, the full market value of property in the community. So it's one number. We have 6 towns. Each town has slightly different rates of assessment and different tax rates on assessed value. This is a standardized number that is used by schools all across the state and by New York State to compare schools, because it equalizes all that. It's fair in terms of that analysis. And again, it's just the levy divided by the market value, the full value of property in the school district. And you can see that that's generally declined. It has declined over the time of this graph from 03-04. What that means is that the levy increases in the levy has increased at a rate less than the increase in the market value of property in the school district. And this chart also shows that. So Penfield's here in the middle of the pack in terms of overall level of tax rate. At one time, and in recent memory, we had one of the highest, and in some years the highest tax rate on assessed valuation, on true valuation as well. So we have, all those factors taken together, we're about at the middle of the pack. And so we've done that over the course of time. That's been done through cuts. We had lots of conversation about what those reductions were at previous board meeting and at the conversation on education. We've also begun to appropriate and to use more reserves through the course of the last several years. We've been able to refund some of these at year end, but we have gradually spent down the retirees' health insurance reserve. We will next year use the IRP funds. And the fair tax repayment, although technically it's not a reserve, it is a one-time revenue, and I thought it important to remind the board about this. It's in our goals, but I think it's easy to forget about. 4 years ago now, Monroe County did not pay schools. They took a year off on paying schools the sales tax. We share in sales tax. They believed that for a variety of technical reasons they didn't have to pay that. Lawsuits ensued. They are paying, but they're paying it back over 5 years. So what that looks like is in next year's budget we'll use the retirement appropriately. We need to use it. The early retirement reinsurance, the IRP money, that's a one-year fund, so we'll build it in next year. It'll be exhausted. The fair plan repayment is also exhausted next year, so $350,000 on our revenue side will be included in next year's budget, and then will go away. And the retiree health insurance accrual that we've been unwinding has one more year of life left in it after 13-14, so 14-15 it'll be in the budget and will no longer be after that. So 15-16 will be the first year without that. So there are some challenges, and just in terms of stage setting as we work our way through this. I've talked a little bit about the history of the levy over the past years. We've talked about the history of state aid generally declining. The one piece that's new and almost brand new to us, the tax cap seems like old news, and it seems like we've been doing this for a long time, but really last year was the first year, wasn't it? So last year with a brand new to us with a cap of 3.14%. We worked our way through to a budget at 1.63% on the levy. And that has long-term consequences. So this chart, again, shows the sort of the cumulative effect of those decisions in a cap environment. So once passed, it's very difficult. You can't, in fact, without an override vote, ever get that money back into your levy. So this chart shows 1.63. Because of that, the rollover, and because of the increased retirement system costs calculated into the cap this year, the cap's at 3.4. If we were to go all the way to that cap, we're still, over the course of 5 years, about $1.1 million behind. At 4%, it magnifies essentially the retirement system money doesn't get built into our levy, it gets built into our budget and not our revenue stream, and that accumulates over 4 years. So all these things accumulate to make this a very important year, I think, for Penfield in terms of our future. We are working our way slowly through this. We want to be very careful about the decisions we make, because we know, I know that I've shared this with the board, we've talked about this at workshops, based on a set of assumptions about the future in terms of retirement system costs and revenue. It appears that we are rapidly working our way through to a point where we would have a structural deficit without significant changes. This doesn't assume significant program changes. This assumes that we continue the program in about the way that we offer it now, which I think we've heard through our conversations on education is valued by people. So we've had lots of more conversations this year about what people expect of us than we have had in the past. We've reached out. We're continuing those conversations. We've had 2 conversations on education, multiple meetings with the school budget advisory team. We did a budget survey. We've talked to students. We've had meetings with students and several more of those coming up. PTA, HSA meetings and conversations at Rotary, because we know that we're at a very significant and important point in Penfield's history, a turning point, if you will, where we need to make careful choices because our history will inform our future. We need to be careful about what we're doing. So with that, right now where we're at is a proposed budget increase at about 1.92. Depending on how the rest of this works out, we would be in the mid-4s for a proposed levy. The state aid, but that's without more information about state aid. So the state aid review will come with the adoption of the state budget. We're anticipating that at about March 25th. We'll have further enrollment. We have another meeting scheduled Monday for program and staffing reviews. I'm continuing to gather information on assessment. Next board meeting on March 19th, we'll review the benefits budget as well as an initial look at levy and rate, and we'll continue that at the budget workshop on March 26th and April 9th. So, I'm sorry, I included one from tonight. And on April 23rd, we'll need to review and adopt. All of this, of course, and I always remind everyone, leading up to the budget hearing on May 7th with a vote on May 21st.
Thank you, Mark. Board members, questions or comments? Steve.
Thank you. Mark, do you have any idea yet where we'll stand for this year, where we'll end in terms of potential surplus?
Yeah, I think this is a good number still. I think we will end this bar chart shows us ending up with surplus in the below at about $3 million. So I think that's where we would end up.
And are you, with your projections that you're doing for us tonight, are you counting on using that money?
Well, we're planning on using part of it. So later in the agenda tonight, you'll see a appropriation of fund balance, which will use part of that money. So I'm continuing to roll forward the $2 million in appropriated fund balance that we've used in past years. So we need to make that up and carry that forward to make this budget work. I would not recommend increasing that over this year's. In fact, one of the conversations that I think we'll want to have, depending on that state budget, is what we can unwind in terms of appropriations from reserves, some balance in terms of use of any new revenue.
One of the things that I think people may be confused by, and you might want to comment on, is that we're showing a $3 million surplus from this current year.
Right.
And yet we're saying we need $2 million approximately more going into next year. And
right. It's the long-term phasing of that makes this a very difficult conversation. I had this conversation with Dr. Grimm today because, as I've said, I think to the board, we can make this turn out however we want in the short term. But the days, I think, when we could make those kind of short-term decisions, I think we take our eye off the long game very much at our own risk now. So, the rules have changed. We need to live within those rules. And I think we need to pay attention to what the consequences. I know this board always has had a long-term look, but I think it's the decisions are much more significant now.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I was getting at, though, was that it really looks like a $5 million increase because it's a $2 million budget-to-budget increase, but our actuals this year were $3 million less than
Right,
our budget.
I understand what you're saying, sure.
And so it appears to be a $5 million increase in our expected expenditures.
So we should work to explain that in some way that's, yeah, I understand.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Mark.
And once again, I have one more slide. And what's become a tradition, I apologize. So later in your agenda is discussion, or later in your agenda is adoption of the legal notice, the required legal notices for this year's budget. And also included in that, in tonight's agenda, is seeker approval of this capital project and of and then also the resolution for approval. So this year, we plan on offering a project with this year's budget, $1.9 million. That's roof replacement. These slides were not updated, so I apologize for that. But roof replacement at Bay Trail, roof replacement at Scribner and Bay Trail gym and locker rooms. The way that splits out, somehow this didn't make it to the slide, so bear with me while I look it up. In terms of the value of those two projects, it's about $650,000 for roof replacement at Scribner. The remainder of that project, about $1.2 million, is locker room renovation. So wall pads, sanding the gym floor, some folding partition replacement, lighting replacement, backboards, and so on, as well as reconfiguration of those showers and the addition of a public restroom. That'll be funded from, as we pointed out, we just had the discussion, from unreserved fund balance, so there would not be an impact on the levy. As we go forward, beginning in 15-16, it would generate about $1.7 million per year in state aid. The other piece of capital project update has to do with continued conversations. At the last board meeting, we talked a little bit about, this isn't an immediate, this is not for an immediate vote. Certainly, it's nothing scheduled or planned at this point, but we've begun conversations about field lighting at the high school. That's been a long-standing issue that Dr. Grimm heard quite a lot about as he came in, so we're beginning to at least address what that might look like. So based on our conversation at the last meeting, I looked at what a schedule, an initial schedule might look like. So what would need to be done is development of project scope. We need to understand just exactly what it is that we would be talking about. So in terms of lights, what, how many, which fields. Gather field use policies from surrounding schools. We're in the process of that. I have Fairport's policy, and I've got folks identified who are gathering the other policies, and we would need to begin development of a draft Penfield policy. What would our policy be like based on that scope, on those lights? What do we really mean by this? Those pieces need to come together, along with quotes for, if we were to do this, what would some impacts be in the community? So in order to move that forward, I'd estimate that we'd be able to have RFPs done for costs. There's some question about what that would be for the traffic study and for lighting studies. Aiming towards a May 28th board meeting to review the lighting study information and a draft field use policy. We would then, at some point, the board would need to declare its intent to be a lead agency for review of this. So the idea being that, as the board becomes informed about what potential impacts might be, the other question that needs to be asked of our surrounding of other interested parties, like the town, like the state education department, would you want to be lead agency? We'd need to then complete that work over the summer, and the idea was, I think, towards an informational meeting at the public to get public input. So by then, we would have gathered this data, we'd understand what it is we were talking about, we'd have something to talk about, and to aim towards a public informational meeting to gather input from the public in September, late September of next year. We were aiming towards early, but it's, I don't think that people, as school starts, we're just, no one's paying attention. So that would be the goal as we would move forward.
Board members, any questions or comments about those two pieces?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We move on to board business. We are on page 3 of your agenda, facilities. Oh, sorry. My apologies. Dr. Grimm, school calendar.
I do want to get the school calendar kind of out there. They're starting to get adopted around the county. While ours is not finalized, the significant key dates are pretty much set in stone. And we have a modified version of it so it's easy to understand as you chronologically move through the year. At the very beginning of the school year, what's different there, at least for teachers, is they would not be coming back in that last week of August. So the first day for teachers would be that day after Labor Day. And that's different because I think students started on that day. So they would have that day off there. That would be a superintendent's conference day. And then the first day for students would be September 4th. Moving through to the next significant point is that Friday before the Columbus Day weekend. That's traditionally been a full-day superintendent's conference day, and that would continue. Moving into November, annually there is a full day for parent conferences at the elementary school level, K-5. One of the things that we're exploring, and this is why it's not a definitive calendar for you now, we're looking at integrating staff development opportunities for our teachers, and we can do that in the half-day format, and we can do that in the full-day format. One of the things that we thought of was taking advantage of that parent conference day where elementary children are off to involve 6-12, the middle and high school, in a half-day staff development. Moving into December, we were looking at a possible half-day staff development K-12, and that would be a second opportunity for middle and high school, and that's the first opportunity, if you don't count the October day, for the elementary school, K-12. One of the things that we're thinking about and looking forward to is the implementation of the Common Core Learning Standards, but also there are new curriculum units that need to be developed and taught, horizontal articulation across the elementary schools. We're going to be examining, as you'll see at the next board meeting, we're going to talk about selection of math supportive resources that are aligned to the Common Core. With that comes a training about what are they, how are we going to use them. There's not very much time to be able to do that during the regular school day. So that would be a possible opportunity there for K-12. Moving into January, we're thinking about, and it's not up here on this, but we're thinking about taking, if you see in February 7th would be a half day, possibly combining the February 7th with another one of the half days to create a single all-day superintendent's conference day, possibly in January. That's one of the other opportunities. I talked with the Parents Advisory Board last night just to get a feel for where they are. Half day, full day, that's the PTA president, all the PTA presidents, and their collective feeling was that the full day was better than the multiple half days. One of the things that came from that and some preliminary discussions with board leadership was, what about the possibility of creating another full day? We were worried about losing state aid for attendance, but when we looked at it, we still have enough days, and when you combine the 2 half-days, you eliminate the need for transportation on the full conference day. So when you eliminate a day of transportation, you eliminate the funds that's required for that. So in a way, we can make parents happy and save money. 2 great things. So we're considering that. Moving forward through February, I should have stopped at the holiday recess. Significant right there. Implications for families. Could be opportunities, could be crises. 2 full weeks at the holiday. And I will say that that's an area-wide decision, so it's a collaborative decision with all the school districts. We'll pay for that later in June, as you'll find out. In February, you can see when that recess break is. And this is why I wanted to get this out now. People are asking about that. February 17th through the 21st. That's a full week. And then into March, we have that Parent Conference Day. That's an annual event for elementary school. But again, can we take advantage of utilizing a half-day for staff development at the middle and high schools? We've got the Good Friday and the April recess, another important marker for family calendars. Good Friday is integrated into the recess. And we can see where Easter is. We have AP exams, and next thing you know, it's Memorial Day, June Regents. One of the things, not a lot of happy campers at the high school level, putting June Regents exams June 3rd and 4th. That allows for scoring and then resetting of the cut points, things like that. So we're not happy about that. It creates a problem schedule-wise, but it's there. And then the Regents will go until, I think there's a bit of a typo there, 17th through the 26th, that Thursday. So that's where you pay for it later. We're ending school in the 21, 22 range this year. We're moving into that next week of June. That allows the kind of stretch out like an accordion and utilize those 2 weeks at the holiday time. But it also eliminates the need to bring teachers in August. And then we have graduation there, which for many of our families, putting that on the calendar, it's that Thursday of that last week. We confirmed that we do have that date at RIT. And we're looking at our last day for students. Those could change, the 24th, 25th for the middle level and the elementary school students. And last day for teachers on that Friday, the 27th. So one of the things we've been doing, it was collaboratively developed at the regional level with other schools, but internally within the district, we're collaboratively developing it with the teachers and with our instructional leadership team. Very important is trying to figure out the amount of time dedicated to staff development, and that's where our instructional leadership team is considering that. But we're also weighing it with the opportunity for savings and the inconveniences to families. Integrating the capacity to deal with the Common Core Learning Standards, the APPR, the evaluation of teachers, and the professional development that accompanies that is very important that we intentionally plan that. One of the ways we can do that is through our calendar. And that's it.
All right, and this is still a draft.
This is a draft, yep.
Any questions or comments? Camille?
I just have a question. I love that you asked the parents and got a feel for what they might like, and you got the sense that they prefer the whole day versus a half day. And I'm wondering, I mean, some of our teachers are parents too, so maybe they prefer that. But academically, isn't it better for the teachers too to maybe have a whole day off versus a bunch of half days? Because a half day, it seems like it's more disruptive. Or if you give a half day, then some people might not send the kids and take advantage and do a 3 day, and then you have to teach the lesson again because not all the kids were there. So I'm just wondering what the teachers, what they were thinking half day versus full.
Right, the implications, especially at the secondary level for things like that. If you have a half day and you have 8 periods throughout the day, do you go 1 through 4? Do you go 1 through 8, but twice as fast? So it does disrupt the momentum quite a bit. So you're right, the combination into the full day, just having the full day off does help with that. There's also momentum of staff development. If you teach half the day, then you kind of have, okay, we got lunch, and then you have 2 or 3 hours, and then you're done, and then sometimes you feel like you got to a certain point and you'd like to take it to the next level, and then you stop for a couple months. So if you do that as a full day, you can get moving in the morning, and you can really finish and go from A to Z all in one day. And we kind of went under the assumption that we're going to be losing state aid because of it. But because we have so many student days already built into the calendar, we still have enough to be able to recover that. The one thing we do sacrifice is a snow day. We go from having 5 built in to having 4 built in. So I'm a little disappointed with that. You know,
It's
no,
been a
not
long
really.
time since we had
haven't
4 or
really,
5 snow days. though,
Historically, we've never gone there.
Yeah.
So we might as well utilize it for building that capacity to deliver the instruction in a way that was going to be best for the kids.
Good, all right. Any other questions or comments? Steve?
I'm just trying to understand, it's been a while since my kids were in this school. We've got kids taking Regents on the day of graduation. How does that work as far as knowing whether, I mean, hopefully all our students will graduate, but that's not always the case. And how is all that determined? So we may have kids walking who really won't graduate, won't get a diploma, potentially? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I know that each district definitely has an answer. I don't know if anybody else has that. I know how I've done in other places, but here, not sure.
Typically, I believe that there's very few students that it's that critical of graduation or not, and it's right up to graduation that they don't get their diploma, and it's determined if they get a diploma, they are included in the festivities and get their diploma mailed to them or to them afterwards, but they are included in the festivities. But my recollection, it's such a minute, I think it was Mary Aronson that started the stalking list of students that, it was a very minute number of students that affected.
And I think they try and, the Regents that a senior is likely to take, so maybe they wouldn't put the physics Regents, which maybe a senior is going to take, maybe they would have the earth science Regents.
No, it's
or
the
the
physics, it's always the physics.
It's the physics
is
that's last?
one.
Then that's the one Mary's always was having to track, but
And
they
if it-
try, I think.
Right, and generally the science requirements, is it three science requirements? Passing the physics regions would not be necessary for a diploma.
Oh, it's not included in their grade.
Right.
Well, unless
And a lot of them
That's
know that,
the
and
key.
that explains some of our physics scores, I believe.
Big ones are
Yes.
like ELA, which is generally a junior level course, is a big one that's required. Some of those
That's the piece I was
in
missing,
fourth
Karen,
year of
that
English.
the Regents test doesn't factor into their grade for the course, which I find surprising, but okay.
And if it does, there are so few students, and they know the names, they know the test, they know when the Regents is coming, that kind of thing. So they're always very, very on top of it.
A lot of
And
scrambling
I know
that one
Dr.
day, though.
Putnam will be as well, yes, a lot of sweating.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Now we can move on to board business. We are on page 3 of your agenda with facilities. Seeker resolutions for the May 21st, 2013 capital project vote. In the past, the State Education Department acted as lead agency and was responsible for making the determination regarding the potential environmental impact of school construction projects. The state has shifted this responsibility to the local school district. In this case, sorry, couldn't help it. So, in this case, the district will be requesting voter approval of a capital project for replacement of approximately 30,000 square feet of built-up roofing at Scribner, renovations at the Bay Trail Gymnasium to include the replacement of lights, partitions, and blackboards, and backboards, floor refinishing, locker room renovations, and a small athletic equipment storage addition of approximately 840 square feet. The anticipated budget for this work is approximately $1,900,000. A resolution authorizing this project will be presented to the voters on May 21st, 2013. Type 2 actions are actions which have been determined not to have a significant impact on the environment. Type 2 actions do not require the completion of an environmental impact statement. This resolution confirms that the proposed project is a Type 2 action and that no further action is required. Resolution for Type 2 action. Whereas the voters of the Penfield Central School District the school district will be asked to approve a proposition authorizing a capital project consisting of reconstruction and equipping of the Scribner and Bay Trail schools, and whereas the school district has submitted or will duly submit a scope of proposed project to the State Education Department identifying the nature and scope of the proposed project, now therefore be resolved by this Board of Education as follows. 1. According to the regulations of the New York State Education Department, the Penfield Central School District is primarily responsible for determining whether an environmental impact statement is required under the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the regulations of the Department of Environmental Conservation of the State of New York, per law as amended, promulgated thereunder as SECRA, and for otherwise making necessary determinations or findings under SECRA prior to taking any action with respect to the project. 2. Based upon the review by the Board of Education of the proposed project, the Board hereby declares itself lead agency to the extent necessary for this purpose, and hereby finds that the proposed action constitutes a Type 2 action, as defined in SECRA regulations, and therefore is not subject to any further review by the school district under SECRA. The action consists of routine activities of an educational institution as well as replacement, rehabilitation, or reconstruction of a structure or facility in kind on the same site pursuant to law. A copy of this resolution will be placed on file in the office of the district clerk, where it will be available for public inspection during business hours. This resolution shall take effect immediately. And our district clerk, Ms. Barrett, will read, your names for the ayes or nays. So may I have a motion, please, that this resolution be approved?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. Marcia?
Mrs. Rutan? Aye. Mrs. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Zalora?
Aye.
Mrs. Babiars?
Aye.
Mr. Piper?
Aye.
Ms. Wilson? Aye. Mrs. Nasra?
Aye.
That is 7 ayes.
Thank you. Change orders. You have a change order for the high school that is in your agenda. This change order has been reviewed by and is supported by architect Scott Jewell, project manager Gary Huffman, clerk of the works Jim Cordero, and assistant superintendent for business Mark Sansucci. May I have a motion, please, that this change order as described in your agenda be approved?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? Steve?
I just have a comment to make that I find it disheartening that we hired an engineering firm and paid them to review work. That was money out of our pocket. They found some areas that were deficient in some way, and those areas are being addressed, which is a good thing, but again, that's money out of our pocket. And it's just, it's unfortunate, I guess. I'd much rather, if it's my personal money, frankly, I would be seeking restitution for all these costs. That this is, I don't expect that kind of effort from a contractor that I hire for me to have to go and hire somebody else to watch over their shoulder, and then for me to have to pay for things that weren't done as best as they could in the first place. So it doesn't give me a good feeling to have to approve this change order.
Thank you. And for those wondering, this is about an additional exiting ladder for the orchestra pit at the auditorium that is being added. So, and the full text is available in our agenda for anyone who wants to know.
Right, and if I, just so I could,
Mark.
if I could, I know the board knows what the issue is, but I thought probably it's worthy of an explanation for the public. So the question, this wasn't a contractor issue, so the contractor bid the work, as it was specified. So this is a question about the design of the work. And the original pit design called for one means of exiting from the pit. Upon completion and as we begin to work towards our certificate of occupancy, the fire marshal raised a question about whether that was appropriate or not. And there were questions, the code's unclear, actually, on, you can, depending on how you read the code, you can make a case that, 1 is the appropriate number or not. So it's, this dancing on the heads of pin kind of question. We had it reviewed and finally came to sort of the common sense conclusion that, wait a minute, it's a pit. It's a little bit like a basement. Two means of egress are required from a basement, so why not from this? It seemed like the responsible thing to do. So this change order reimburses the contractor for the cost of what he had never bid on as the cost of the second means of exiting.
Thank you for correcting that. I didn't mean to say contractor.
Yeah, no, I understand, but
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, wanted to be clear about that.
Okay, excellent. Any other additional questions? All right, thank you, Mark, for the additional explanations. All right, all those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. There's a change order that you have for district office also, and this change order has been reviewed by and is supported by architect Victor Maselli, project manager Gary Huffman, clerk of the works Jim Cordero, and assistant superintendent for business Mark Sansucci. May I have a motion, please, that this change order as described in your agenda be approved?
So moved.
Questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Financial items. Notice of the annual meeting budget vote and election for May 21st, 2013. The Board of Education must pass a resolution calling for an annual hearing and vote for the district for the 2013-2014 school year. May I have a motion, please, to hold the annual hearing of the voters on May 7th, 2013, and the vote on the budget and other propositions on May 21st, 2013, and that notice of the same be given in accordance with the law.
So moved.
Questions and comments this time? All right. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. All right, and we will be, okay, we will be taking a call at the end for that one. Notice of annual meeting, budget vote and election, Penfield Central School District, towns of Penfield, Perrington, Pittsford, Brighton, Macedon, and Walworth, counties of Monroe and Wayne, New York. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the qualified voters of the Penfield Central School District, Monroe County, New York, will be held in the senior high school building in said district on Tuesday, May 7th, 2013, at 7:30 p.m. for the presentation of the budget. That the annual meeting vote and election of the qualified voters of the Penfield Central School District of the town of Penfield, Monroe County, New York, will be held at the senior high school in said district on Tuesday, May 21st, 2013, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., at which time the polls will be open to vote by voting by machine or ballot upon the following items. 1, to elect 2 members of the board for 3-year terms commencing July 1st, 2013 and expiring on June 30th, 2016 to succeed Mrs. Barbara Babiars and Mr. John Piper. And 2, the adoption of the following propositions. Proposition 1, to adopt the annual budget of the school district for the fiscal year 2013-2014, and to authorize the requisite portion thereof to be raised by taxation on the taxable property of the district. Proposition 2, resolve that the Board of Education of the Penfield Central School District is hereby authorized and directed to purchase 6 66 passenger-type school buses and to expend from the capital fund, therefore, a sum not exceeding $636,610, which sum shall consist of a transfer from the 2011 School Bus Reserve Fund established pursuant to Section 3651 of the Education Law. Proposition 3, resolve that the Board of Education of the Penfield Central School District is hereby authorized to amend the current general fund budget and undertake certain capital improvements consisting of reconstruction and equipping of the Scribner and Bay Trail School buildings and facilities, including, without limitation, roof reconstruction at Scribner and gymnasium reconstruction and storage addition at Bay Trail, and the acquisition of certain original furnishings, equipment, and apparatus, and other incidental improvements required in connection therewith for such construction and school use, all at an estimated maximum aggregate cost of $1,900,000, with the source of this appropriation to be funded from the district's unassigned general fund balance as permitted by law. That the text of the aforesaid proposition may appear on the ballot labels in the following abbreviated form. Proposition. Shall the proposition set forth in the legal notice of this annual voter meeting authorizing amending the current budget to undertake reconstruction and equipping of the Scribner and Bay Trail school buildings and facilities, including without limitation roof reconstruction at Scribner and gymnasium reconstruction and storage addition at Bay Trail, all at an estimated maximum aggregate cost of $1,900,000 to be funded from the district's unassigned fund balance, all as more fully described in said notice, be approved. That a copy of the statement of the amount of money which will be required to fund the school district's budget for 2013-2014, exclusive of public monies, together with propositions to be voted upon, may be obtained by any resident of the district during business hours beginning Tuesday, April 30th, 2013, on the district's internet website, www.penfield.edu. During normal business hours at any public library or free association library within the district, or during the hours of 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., except Saturday, Sunday, and holidays at the administration building and at each of the following schoolhouses in which school is maintained: Administration Building, 2590 Atlantic Avenue, Penfield; Senior High School, 25 High School Drive, Penfield; Bay Trail Middle School, 1760 Scribner Road, Penfield; Cobble School, 140 Gebhard Road, Penfield; Harris Hill School, 2126 Penfield Road, Penfield; Indian Landing School, 702 Landing Road North, Rochester; Scribner Road School, 1750 Scribner Road, Penfield. That petitions nominating candidates for the office of member of the Board of Education will be available March 1st, 2013, and shall be filed with the clerk of said school district at her office in the administration building not later than Monday, April 22nd, 2013, between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Each petition shall be directed to the clerk of the district and shall be signed by at least 28 voters of the district and must state the name and residence of the candidate and the residence of each signer. That application for absentee ballots will be obtainable on or after April 23, 2013, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday, except holidays, from the district clerk in person or by calling 249-5702. Completed applications must be received by the district clerk at least 7 days before the election if the ballot is to be mailed to the voter, or the day before the election if the ballot is to be delivered personally to the voter. Absentee ballots must be received by the district clerk not later than 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday, May 21st, 2013. That a list of persons to whom absentee ballots are issued will be available for inspection to qualified voters of the district in the office of the district clerk on and after May 14, 2013, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. on each day except Sundays prior the day set for the annual election, and on May 21, 2013, the day set for the election, and said list will be posted at the polling place at the election. Any qualified voter present in the polling place may object to the voting of the ballot upon appropriate grounds for making his/her challenge, and the reasons therefore known to the inspector of election before the close of the polls. That the qualified voters of the school district shall be entitled to vote at said annual vote and election. A qualified voter is one who is a citizen of the United States of America, 18 years of age or older, and resident within the school district for a period of 30 days next preceding the annual vote and election. The school district may require all persons offering to vote at the budget vote and election to provide one form of proof of residency pursuant to education law. Such form may include a driver's license, a non-driver identification card, a utility bill, or a voter registration card. Upon offer of proof of residency, the school district may also require all persons offering to vote to provide their signature, printed name, and address. that pursuant to a rule adopted by the Board of Education in accordance with education law, any referenda or propositions to amend the budget otherwise to be submitted for voting at said election must be filed with the Penfield Central School District Board of Education at the Administration Building on or before Wednesday, March 20th, 2013 at 5 p.m. Must be typed or printed in English, must be directed to the clerk of the school district and signed by at least 100 voters of the district, and must state the name and residence of each signer. However, the school board will not entertain any petition to place before the voters any proposition, the purpose of which is not within the powers of the voters to determine, or any proposition which fails to include a specific appropriation where the expenditure of monies is required by the proposition. Signed by our district clerk, Marcia Barrett, dated March 19, 2013, School District, Penfield Central School District, Town of Penfield, County of Monroe, New York. Marcia, will you take a roll call now?
Mrs. Rutan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mrs. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Zlor?
Aye.
Mrs. Babiars?
Aye.
Mr. Piper?
Aye.
Ms. Wilson? Aye. And Mrs. Nazara?
Aye.
That is 7 in favor.
Thank you. Resolution regarding an Article 7 tax certiorari matter for Elderwood, Rochester ALF. Elderwood, Rochester ALF formally challenged the tax assessment for real property located at 100 Elderwood Road for tax years 2011-2012 and 2012-2013. The town of Penfield has agreed to certain reductions in assessments. Justice Rosenbaum of the New York State Supreme Court, Monroe County, issued a decision adjudicating these challenges and reduced the assessment as it appears in your agenda. May I have a motion, please, that the Board of Education approves the payment as described in your agenda and authorizes payment of the refund from the 2012-2013 property tax collections?
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Appointment of petty cash custodian. Due to a recent resignation at Scribner Road Elementary, there is a need to appoint a new petty cash custodian. May I have a motion, please, that the Board of Education approves the appointment of Patty Leo as petty cash custodian for the amount of $75 petty cash fund at Scribner Road Elementary?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. This brings us to our policy review. And our first one is Policy 7300, Code of Conduct. Camille or Catherine, can I ask you please to speak about those, or?
The Code of Conduct changes in language were brought to us by Sue Coomer, who's our TOSA, I believe, in charge of this area, and she wanted to let us know that we needed some updates to language. I think every time we said personnel before, that really didn't include everybody who could be employed by the district. For example, you could have a vendor in the building, that's not personnel, and so we really wanted to make sure we included anybody who could be in the building exposed to students. This is under this is in this student section of the policy manual. Another one I think you can probably understand is the change from saying that it was, we used to have en route to school, if a student was en route to school, but that could be interpreted that if they were on, in another direction or not to school, that our policy wouldn't apply. So now we have a more blanket statement while riding transportation, so it includes whether they're going to school or from school or, that kind of thing. So that's real. Those are the changes, really just language so that we're more in compliance with the law.
All right, thank you. Policy 7550, complaints and grievances.
This one was also reviewed, especially by Dr. Grimm and his administrative team. Mr. Hennick at the high school in particular was involved in this one and recommended necessary language. This is about if a student makes a complaint or a grievance that we do everything to prevent any kind of retaliatory behavior. I think it's pretty straightforward. Both of these policies will be on the website if any of the public wants to review them or provide input. This is only a first read, and typically we would then, at our next meeting, have a second read and adopt, but if we can have as many reads of a policy as we need or want. So that's the phase we are at right now, though, is we're showing you this new language, and if anyone has any input, please let us know.
All right. Okay, thank you. We move on to our donations. Donations totaling $500 for items in the 2012-2013 budget have been granted to district schools as shown in your agenda, and it is to Bay Trail. May I have a motion, please, that the Board of Education approve an amendment totaling $500 to the 2012-2013 budget as shown above. The amount submitted both as revenue and expenditure item, and express its gratitude to the donors, Lisa McGinn and the 9/11 Tribute Center, for their generous donation.
So moved.
Questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. President's remarks. I have just one. I would like to thank all the residents who came to the conversation on education, also all the staff members, administrators who were here. This was a great evening. I think, seeing so many faces, some familiar faces, some new faces also. It was great to get the feedback, from everybody. So thank you very much for everyone who has been very involved in our process and developing the budget. And that's it at this time. We have no unfinished business that I know of. New business. Right, may I have a motion, please, that the meeting be adjourned at 9:20 p.m. Questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you.